Welcome back to another episode of Taking Inventory. This week, we're welcomed by Brendan McCarthy, the CMO of Criteo, one of the leaders and innovators in commerce media. Really excited to have him on the episode to help us understand what is taking place in retail media and commerce media. So, Brendan, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
We'll get into Criteo and commerce, but you've had a pretty storied career. You were at Nielsen leading a number of divisions for a number of years, and then a few years ago joined Criteo as CMO, leading a handful of different teams. Can you walk us through maybe your career journey and how you ended up at Criteo, what excites you about the job, and why you joined the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to clarify though, at Nielsen, rather than leading divisions, it was leading the communications function and then working with the product marketing, leading the product marketing function as well. So it wasn't a P&L responsibility. So I just want to make sure that I'm not being inflated beyond what I'm actually deserving here and speaking with you guys.
It's a rare touch in a marketer to be that transparent. So we appreciate it.
Well, that would be a big one though.
No, I agree.
My career journey is, for some reason, I'm really drawn to companies that are in transformational moments. So that's been sort of the common theme that goes through a lot of my career. Starting in Washington, D.C. after undergrad, I worked in public interest, PR type of work, doing campaigns that were adjacent to politics. And they were about, they were change related campaigns. And so I'm heading into more corporate type of work, working with companies that were going through crises or transforming as businesses when I worked with Edelman. And then the sort of digital revolution that came along while I was there. So that was, I started at Edelman, I think it's either 2005 or 2006 or so. So that's when digital was really starting to take hold in the private sector. And companies were figuring out what to do with it. Then going into my work with Nielsen, Nielsen has long been associated with and had a lot of success with rating audiences to ads. And there's a long misperception that they didn't measure digital. And so it was a big challenge for the company. And it was a funny situation, or it is potentially still a situation where the clients put a lot of pressure on Nielsen in a way where it's less of a partnership in some cases, and it can be antagonistic. So it was a strange dynamic to have to work in. But Nielsen really needed the world to know, especially in the United States, that the audiences that it was being able to measure with a linear feed across different digital devices were actually rolling up and helping to create a currency number that the industry could trade on. So a lot of it was really educating everybody that was a naysayer or a believer, or whatever, that Nielsen was able to give them what they paid for. And we did it really through a lot of demos, a lot of storytelling, a lot of transparency. And it was really important to help tell the story using a lot of proof points and being able to get out there and do things that were uncomfortable for the company. And then similarly for Criteo, an amazing legacy as a company that had a really strong retargeting business. That's how it was formed. But then as retargeting shifted in marketers' minds and the technological underpinning and third-party cookies started to come into question, Criteo realized that it needed to change along with the market. And at the same time, we recognized that retail media was starting to rise, and we saw that opportunity and helped to sort of develop an industry category that we call commerce media, that everyone calls commerce media now, and help to redefine our story around what the opportunity is with commerce media, and so that people could see the full offering of what Criteo has alongside retargeting and the other capabilities that we're able to bring to bear for clients, be it acquisition, retention, and retargeting, or different retail media tactics that we bring to bear.
And for the commerce media business, I think all of us, we hear Criteo in that context like all the time. And, I think part of us, maybe just for listeners, and again, I think I told you, before we started recording, a lot of our listeners are people who work at like a Meta or a Snap or a Pinterest. And so like they haven't had sort of the familiarity of using like a third party service to stand up like your ad platform. Can you kind of explain like how do you guys work when someone decides like, okay, I want to roll out an RMN? Like how do they actually like use Criteo? Like are you guys like the ad server and the ad sales and the ad tools? Like where does Criteo sort of start and stop?
And I think just sorry, Brendan, just to add to that too, like what makes a good like retail media network? I'm sure you're getting blasted by a ton of companies that want to do this, but it only makes sense for a handful.
Yeah, it really well. That's one of the interesting things about the rise of retail media is that it really all depends on the company itself and the client and their capabilities. So, um, there's been a trend of larger retail companies that want to in-house their capabilities, from their tech to their ad sales team. Um, and have made shifts to do that. And then there's other companies that think that they want to do that, but it might not be the most practical thing because not every retailer is a tech company. And as your audience probably knows well, is that not every company can become a tech company. If you remember, was it 10 years ago or so? I think was it Ford at CES announced that it was a technology company. And I remember for a while, a lot of companies started to come out, and it was very similar actually to AI. Is that you had to talk about yourself as a technology company, even if your core business wasn't technology. Ford makes automobiles; they make great automobiles with great technology in many cases, right? So, for retailers, making that pivot from being a retailer to being a retailer that has got a really strong technology platform, that's going to be a struggle. Some are able to do it. Some have the capabilities because they've got a really strong network of first party data from customers that have registered with them. They're able to extend that to bring in their customers through a thriving e-commerce platform. But some, it's not going to be for everybody. So the shift to creating a retail media network that's in-housed from ad sales down to the tech itself, I think is really going to vary depending on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And some will succeed and some will realize that it's not for them. But overall, I think the value proposition of retail media is there, and the excitement for why they either want to in-house or work with a third-party company like Criteo in a variety of different capacities from tech to ad sales is real because it's a new high margin revenue stream that they see, and they want to make sure that they're able to capitalize on it. So, it's really going to depend, but the value proposition of retail media and what it means for the future and the growth is real.
And if someone's listening that like works at, let's make an example, like a rideshare company that wants to roll out an RMN, right? Like would they look at Criteo and be like, listen, like I can white label all your tools. You guys would be all like all the auction logic, and you guys could also like, are you guys on the street also selling for me? Like, are you also a demand partner for that?
It depends. In some cases, we handle ad sales for our clients, and in other cases, they handle that in house. So it truly depends on the level of spend and investment that they want to make in creating their own capability. So it truly, I know it's a wishy washy answer, but the reality is true. It all depends on what they want to do. At Criteo, we've got a really talented sales team, so we've been able to make a lot of clients happy by handling that capacity for them. But some clients prefer to say, okay, gradually over time, we're going to create our own in-house sales staff, and they're going to sell ads. But you have to go back to what the core value proposition of what a retailer is, and they've got a different kind of commitment to their customers, and they've got to be able to balance that and figure out how they're going to tap into the opportunity of retail media, while at the same time, follow the strategy of whatever they're trying to do with their own tech platform.
I think one thing that I think is kind of unique maybe about Criteo, at least in terms of a lot of the sort of ad tech companies we've talked to, is it's a French-based company, correct? And I don't know, have you? I've never worked for, I guess, a non-U.S. headquartered company before, but has there been anything interesting about having kind of more of like a global perspective? Yeah, just like anything that's sort of come to mind as you've kind of had that experience?
Yeah, well, I love that Criteo is a French headquartered company. It's definitely in our culture. There's a lot of cultural similarities between the French and Americans, though we're a global company. It's not just the United States and France. We have important markets all across Europe and in APAC. But the French, it's a really strong engineering culture, and a lot of our engineers are French and based in France. We've got a big engineering group in the United States as well. But that's a big legacy. If you think of some French automakers, Airbus, there's a lot of different strong engineering cultures that come from France. So it bodes well in that regard, and it's fun to work for a French company. It's fun to learn about their culture, and I don't know. It's very unique to Criteo. Our culture is very specific, but it's definitely a French. It has a French vibe that we all embrace.
And given the, I guess the footprint in Europe and outside of the U.S., generally, like are retail media networks and like retailers wanting to go down that path? Is it the same in the U.S. And internationally, or like are we at a different cycle in the U.S. versus other markets? And like, how do you guys approach that?
That's a great question, because from a sales and growth strategy, we look at that as well and from a marketing perspective as well, right? We say, okay, where are we really established? Where do we need to do more brand awareness work? Where are we more mid funnel? Where are we more on the conversion side? So in the United States, the biggest adopters of retail media, from a client perspective, 54%, and Europe, 56%, and in Northeast Asia is 35%. But I think if you look in the sophistication or just the trajectory of where the maturity cycle is, I'd say in the United States, the retailers are more sophisticated and are further along, more mature, incorporating different kinds of technology, coming along differently in EMEA. So it's sort of like if you travel west to east from the United States to EMEA to APAC, you sort of see a growing or sort of a different sort of maturity cycle. Whereas in APAC, they're just understanding. We're just starting to help them understand the value proposition of retail media, telling the commerce media story, why it's important. So from a marketing perspective, you're going into different markets and you're working different parts of the funnel to help them to say, okay, the stories that we tell in APAC are similar to the stories that we were telling 2 to 3 years ago or longer in the United States. So it's sort of using a marketing playbook that you were using to introduce the value proposition of retail media, in the United States 4 years ago, that we're rolling out in APAC to help that market understand. So there's definitely differences in terms of where they are and what they're doing. And yeah, I'll pause there.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the U.S. starting that playbook like 3 or so years ago. I don't think at the time retail media was in the vernacular like it is obviously today, and there were as many companies going into it. And so I'd love to know, like, how did you start to frame the transition from Criteo as a retargeting company to a commerce media company, and like bring that education to the market, start to form that perspective in the market to now where you guys are today, and repeating that playbook in other markets?
Well, we approach that differently. So there's the company reputation storytelling that we undertake to say, okay, we're trying to take Criteo from point A to point B, while at the same time we're trying to help our clients understand what the opportunity is similarly, right? So if we're doing the transformation work for Criteo, we're showing people to say, okay, you trust Criteo because for years and years, Criteo did a brilliant job retargeting. So you know that we are very good and we have talented engineers and a footprint and great clients. And so you should trust us to be able to change, right? And so what you do at the beginning of that from a transformational playbook is you effectively borrow people's trust in you. You borrow from them to say, you should trust me because we have been great and we can change. And then you pay back that trust by making good on the things that you tell them you're going to do. You say, okay, Criteo is becoming a commerce media company. We're shifting from being a pure play retargeter into a commerce media company that offers, that offers a retail media play, that offers an SSP, that has different things that are going to help advertisers engage in different ways with e-commerce. And people say, oh, okay, well, how do you know you can do that? And you say, well, it's because we've been able to be successful in this arena previously, so trust us. And then so people are willing to trust you because you ask them to, and they believe that you've been able to be successful in the past. This is all sort of esoteric. You're not necessarily asking people, having this conversation, right? But that's effectively what you're doing when you're doing a transformational campaign. And it's and it's at that point you have to, in order to preserve people's trust, you have to do what you say you're going to do. So you show them, you say, this is the roadmap. These are the products that we say we're gonna roll out. These are the things that we are going to do by X time, and then you have to do those things. Because if you don't, those are betrayals of trust. Because you've put yourself, you've extended yourself, you leveraged your trust to change. And if you don't make good on that, then people are going to remember that, and it's going to be a worse situation for you. And we have been fortunate to be able to pay back people's trust by doing what we said we were going to do. And from different things like introducing products that we said we're going to have, like helping retailers be able to buy, or helping brands be able to buy across multiple retailers, which is an industry need, to different things that are helping to unify the ability to measure campaigns, to things like acquiring IPON Web, which is was important to our transformation as well. So it's we've been rigorous in making sure that we do what we say we're going to do, so that Criteo as a company can move forward and not be tied back to a certain point solution type of approach.
And when going through something like this transformational, like how do you as the CMO create sort of like, I guess, that trust with your team, or get like, I think, it's like one of those things where like you can only control so much. It's like the product team has to deliver for you. And so have you found that like there's a way to ensure that like they understand like we cannot blow this trust?
Yeah, it's not just for my team, but if you think about internal communications and employee communications, you have to show people the path. You have, and you can't forget that you just told them once. You have to continue to remind people. It's all about repeating the message and reminding them this is our strategy. And people will think that you've changed your. No, this is our strategy. We're still executing the same strategy, and say, remember, we're in the middle of a transformation. We're going from point A to point B. Point A looked like this. Point B looks like this. And here's where we are now. So as part of the internal storytelling, in order to keep people engaged, in order to keep top talent, in order to attract the best talent, you have to continue to bring people in on that journey so they come along with you. Otherwise, through the ups and downs that inevitably happen along the way, they'll lose you, or they'll want to be lost. So you have to continue to engage people and bring them along that path, and help them see the future, see the journey. So that's communicating internally to employees to give them that roadmap is almost as important. It's just as important as the roadmap that you're rolling out for the rest of the world.
And a lot of these transformations, I feel like more recently, and this may be an over exaggeration, but it feels like more recently, like they've changed their name to do the transformation. So like Facebook, Meta, like Twitter X, Google Alphabet, right? Did you guys think about that? Because I think one thing that's interesting is like Criteo did mean something different. Now I think everyone knows it's Criteo's Commerce Media and RMN. Like you guys have pulled it off. But was there a debate internally of like, do we go start fresh, or is it like, is your school of thought is like you leverage the brand equity you have and you grow?
When I came in, they gave me free reign to say, okay, what do we need to do in order to do that? And in a consultation with the CEO and the leadership team, we all kind of worked together on it, and everything was on the table. But we refreshed the brand, we refreshed the look and feel, we refreshed the logo, we refreshed the narrative, but we stopped short of changing the name because exactly to your point, the Criteo name had so much equity. And so if you're able to, and if if your strategy is to draw on the trust that people have and the name recognition and the affinity with the brand, you need that asset in order to be able to say, okay, us for this thing, you should also be able to trust us to be able to do the next thing.
And is there, like, when doing that, like, even if Criteo meant something kind of totally different in some ways, is it still in your mind worth it to just be like, listen, like, you trust this thing for something different, but it was great, and so that is why you should hold on to it and use it for that transformation? Is that kind of the school of thought?
It kind of, well, so I don't know. That's the thing about the Criteo name and what we do. It is in the same category of what we've always done. So it's not that we are, we were, making, trucks before and now we're making cell phones or something like that. We were always, a leader in e-commerce. It's just a specific tactic has been added on to. We still do retargeting, but now we do retargeting with retention and acquisition on the performance media side, and and on a retail media part of the business, it's a range of different tactics that we work with for retailer clients and those who aren't in the retail vertical as well. Sort of making it the broader commerce media opportunity. So it's not as though we've changed from and abandoned doing one thing and now we do something totally else. It's that we've expanded our offering so that there's a broader sort of value proposition that can take advantage of the opportunity that we see with a company that can do commerce media, which is being able to connect with people in those moments when they are shopping, those moments of discovery, so that we can take them and deliver commerce outcomes for them.
I'm curious, you've talked now about kind of the internal education and internal transformation of teams that's required, the client kind of transformation, educating them, leveraging the brand equity from Criteo's history and performance historically. But then, you guys, again, 3-4 years ago, like, retail media wasn't what it is today. And obviously there's still a lot of change and evolution happening, but it is top of mind for a lot more brands. And so, like, how do you guys approach pushing forward the industry as a whole, right? Because Criteo or any singular business can only be as successful as the industry. And so, like, are you guys working with peer groups or, like, quote unquote competitors to, like, move a singular narrative forward? Like, how do you look at the macro environment and making sure that this wave continues and it's not some fleeting trend that your customers come back and say, okay, that was fun for a year, or like the Ford example where we're a technology company for a year, now we're back to being an automaker.
Well, I think externally there are tangible data points that exist. You have Amazon, which was the pioneer in retail media, and they were incredibly successful, and retail media was already starting to become a thing even before they published their ad revenue numbers, which I think blew people's minds. And then Walmart has been doing it very successfully. They cut out their ad revenue as well, and people are turning their heads, and of course they want a piece of that. And then there's other and these are all things that kind of happened along the way when we're working on our own thing and we're trying to build this, because at the same time we've had a robust retail media business all along too. But it's the tidal wave of interest that came in from the rest of the industry that opened people's eyes, that say, okay, this isn't just something that Amazon is doing well and that Walmart is being able to do really well too. This is a real thing with real a real opportunity there, and you've got consulting groups that are weighing in with sizing the ad spend opportunity, and talking about ad budget shifting into retail media. And so altogether, there becomes a chorus of voices that surround it to say, okay, this is really a thing happening. And I'd say in many ways, for Criteo, it's there's been a blend of skill and luck too. So it's being in the right place at the right time with the right offering. And we hope that'll continue to be the case. But with you have numbers out there saying that ad spend in retail media is going to be 150 billion by 2026 or 2027. That's huge. Other people saying it's going to be 54 billion just in the U.S. And if 80% of that spend goes to Walmart and Amazon, that's a huge amount of opportunity that exists for the rest of the industry to be able to take advantage of. So the value proposition is there from a pure economics perspective, and then it's up to companies to say, okay, then how do I want to play it? What's my best way of going about it? And we're paying close attention to all the industry dynamics and and what works best from our own strategic capabilities to be able to tap that and the growth that we see. But there's a lot of things that have been in play that have created the momentum around retail media, and not just things that Criteo was talking about or wanted to happen.
And given that you guys are in a unique position where you have solutions both on the supply and demand side, like as a marketer, how do you have sort of those same conversations, I guess like in parallel? And again, maybe even for listeners, like I think of it as on, one hand, you guys are like powering the platform for something like Shipped, which is like purely like a supply side sort of solution. And then the other side, like we have a lot of friends that are like Shopify merchants, and you guys have this like amazing sort of demand solution for them that they can just like tap into. And so like, yeah, is there any good lessons out there for the listeners? And we actually at Snap, we were in charge of the product marketing team for a couple of years there. So we have a bunch of product marketers that listen to this as well. So yeah, just kind of curious how you think about balancing being on both sides of the problem set.
Well, it depends on who your client is, because not all clients are accessing through a supply or a demand side. And I think we have somewhere north of 22,000 clients at Criteo. So as 250 retailer clients, more than 18,000 clients on our performance media business, and a ton of those are work with us with Shopify. So it really all depends on what segment they're in. If they're large enterprise clients, they're mid or tail. It really all depends. So we don't look at it in terms of being a one-stop shop where we have supply and demand, and that's sort of shaping how we go to market purely. It's an asset for sure, because it helps us be able to talk about the broader capabilities of the business. But it's not just the specific way that we go to market. Overall, for the commerce media opportunity, what we want to show brands is that there's a significant opportunity that exists beyond Amazon and Walmart, right? I talked a little bit about what that opportunity is. They have to be able to see that there's everything from marketplaces to being able to discover things on TikTok or discover things on Amazon and then go make a purchase at a specific retailer. So it's less about starting with what our capabilities are than it is starting with the consumer and having a good understanding of where they want to begin their journey and how we set up offerings that are going to meet their needs.
And with Amazon, having, I think, such a head start, I think, as you said, like they didn't report numbers for a number of years, and then everyone was shocked once they started reporting their ad revenue. And then they've just had such a head start, and so when you look at kind of market sizing, they capture. You would know the number better than me, but I mean it's upwards of like 30 to 50%, depending what you're looking at. And then Walmart, you said they're obviously investing heavily, growing very quickly, but when you look at their revenue versus Amazon, they're a fraction of it. And then you start to look at, I think you mentioned 20,000 plus customers on your side. How do you think about, from a marketer's perspective, getting the rest of the market kind of aggregated as like a singular power, unified power against maybe an Amazon, a Walmart, and some of the largest players to, as you said, capture that aggregate demand, that aggregate supply, and create kind of an alternative?
I think it's about choice, and I think from a marketer's perspective, if you're a B2B marketer like me, or if you're B2C, you're looking at your ad spend and you're wanting different options. You're not wanting to concentrate necessarily and putting all your spend in Amazon, put it all into put it on the Meta or put it on the TikTok. You want to be able to spread it out to make sure that you're not leveraged in one specific area or another. And I think that's something that Criteo does a great job of. Is on the performance side, if I'm a marketer and I'm looking for performance, you can go to Meta, you can go to Google, but you should also have Criteo as part of your mix as well, because we have the ability to reach a number of different consumers that aren't just concentrated, and there's economic benefits as well in terms of the CPMS. And the same applies for the commerce media sort of, or the retail side of the company, is that you don't necessarily want to concentrate all of your spend within Walmart or Amazon. You want to be able to access a range of different supply that is going to be differentiated, a range of different consumers. I wish I could break down. I used to have some data points on the demographics of consumers that exist outside of Amazon and Walmart, but there are ways of looking at the demos that you're able to attract who those consumers are, and say, okay, well then, are they going to be more or less affluent? What are the ages? What are the profiles? What's the overall lifetime value that I'm going to get in making a purchase through these different things? And then being really strategic about your ad spend from that perspective as well.
Got it. And one other thing that I think we've always been curious about, and we've talked about on the podcast, but like the opportunity for retail media to service non-endemic advertisers. So advertisers that either aren't in the retail space, don't organically live on or within these kind of retail media networks, or with these retail brands. Like, what is the opportunity you're seeing there? Are non-endemic brands starting to embrace it much more? Like, what does that look like over the next few years?
I'm not able to project that over the next few
Yeah.
years, but I think it's catching on. I think we're seeing more of it. We're seeing clients experiment with it, but it's definitely, when you prove, if you look at the overall cycle of retail media, when you prove the retail media opportunity exists, and then you prove that there's a brand affinity capability within buying in retail media, then you tend to gravitate there. Some research that we do have, it doesn't break out endemic or non-endemic, but we found that on average, shoppers who make a purchase prompted by an ad, a retail media ad, continue to buy from the brand 5 more times over the next 6 months. So you see a lot more shopping loyalty from retail media campaigns. So non-endemic brands that are looking at those data points are certainly interested in saying, okay, how can I grow my brand, and then also be able to build in lifetime value from a shopper, going from that perspective.
Interesting. And you may not be able to answer this, because it's like, you may not, I guess, like be able to pick your favorite kid, but just given that you see so much of what retailers are doing, are there any retailers that you think are just like doing an amazing job from a marketing and comms perspective when it comes to retail media, like how they are positioning their RMNs to sort of stand out differently than other ones?
I'm not going to pick a particular one, but I am fascinated overall by the differentiators, because we talk about the different life cycle that the retail media networks are in, right? Between Amazon, they've made recent announcements and the capabilities that they're trying to do to enhance their tech capability. The work that Walmart is doing, the acquisitions that they've made, from Target to Best Buy, eBay, all different kinds of shapes and sizes of retail media networks and retail media players, and how they're approaching it. I'm fascinated by it because I think they're all they're energized. And the funny thing that to me to kind of look at it is that you think about it, you're like, oh my God, these are retailers. These aren't just, it's not like Google or Meta or Snap or or any other sort of like pure play tech company where you typically see the arms race taking place, and everybody's reading competitive data to understand what's the next tech acquisition. They think, man, these are retailers, and these are places that consumers, from a B2C perspective, are going in to buy sheets and like new pillows for their in-laws that are visiting. So it's I look at it as a fascination from a tech perspective to see how the arms race is shaping up. I think it's fascinating in that perspective. So I'm not going to pick a particular one, but it's fun to watch. And, it's fun to watch any type of scaling industry. And I don't know if you all kind of zoom out from the AI conversation, but from when OpenAI said, hey, we've got this capability back in November of 2022, to when Microsoft said, okay, well, we're actually making a massive investment and then we're incorporating it into Bing, and how that created a watershed moment for the industry. Then over the year, how everybody jumped on the AI bandwagon, and then now how AI is becoming less of this concept to a theory to something that's highly productized, to something that's incorporated and creating change in the business, and that's all a course of whatever 18 months or something like that. So if you look at different concepts that appear in through tech or through popular conversation, and watch how they quickly go through from hype cycle to application to generating revenue, and you apply that to different sectors like retail media or wherever you want to go. I think that's fascinating. I think that's fun to watch, and it's a good it's a good learning opportunity for marketers or product marketers or anybody else who's just sort of saying, okay, what is really happening here, and how do I follow what the conversation is versus the reality versus what's generating money.
Yeah, it's funny because we see a trend, given that we've always come from kind of like the social network side, and it's basically just like social networks trying to become retailers and retailers trying to become social networks. Like everyone's just, it's like that, that meme of like Spider-Man, everyone pointing at each other. And yeah, it's just, to your point, like at the end of the day, I think everyone's realizing it's really useful to help people buy things like on the properties you own. And so, the same way how it's like, it's interesting to watch retailers adapt to becoming ad tech companies. It's also equally interesting to watch ad tech companies try to become retailers. So yeah, it's been fun to watch the whole transition.
Brendan, this has been great. I mean, this conversation's been a lot of fun. Before we wrap, we'd love to just for anyone listening that wants to learn more about Criteo, wants to see some of the research. I mean, you know reference some numbers and some stats that I'm sure you and your team have kind of put together over the years. Where can listeners find some of these reports, learn more about Criteo, or is there anywhere that we should direct them?
Yeah, go to Criteo.com. You can also, check out our LinkedIn pages. We have very active publishing plan on LinkedIn. So check out all the stuff that we're publishing there. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere where people want us to be. But you can find a ton of detail on our website and through other places where we're on, really active on social.
That's great. We'll include those in the show notes. We appreciate your time today, walking us through all that. It's been a good time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the conversation. It was fun.
Thanks, man.
Okay.